English by the Nature Method, Chapter 55. The 55th chapter. An important question. Storm's special work for Mr. Edwards made it necessary for him to spend many evenings at the manager's house. When work was finished on these nights, Mrs. Edwards and Marion usually led the tea table, and they all had a cup of tea together. In this way, it was not long before the two young people had become great friends. They went about together quite a lot, to restaurants now and then, to see a picture, or on small trips to places outside London. On the Sunday following the trip to Brighton, Marion had agreed to go with Storm to spend a day in the hills south of London. London itself is mostly built on very flat ground, but a short distance to the south of the city there are high hills, from which there is a very beautiful view of London and the country round it. The highest of the hills is called Leith Hill. That was where they were going that day, since Storm had not been there yet. "I'm looking forward to getting up into the hills," Storm said as they sat in the bus. "I don't find flat country very interesting, the same wherever you look. In the hills, on the other hand, the country changes all the time, and there is always something new to be seen. Hello, what was that?" he suddenly cried out, as the bus threw them over to one side and then stopped. They had just come round a curve in the road and had nearly run into an old car that was standing in the road. "That was a near thing," Marion said. "If the driver hadn't been so quick in using the brakes and stopping the bus, there would no doubt have been an accident. Look at the cloud of dust that the wheels made." This is the wheel. "This is one of the new buses with brakes both on the front wheels and on the back wheels. That's why she was able to stop so quickly when I put the brakes on," the driver said proudly, as he started the bus again. "If it had been one of the old ones," he continued, "I'm afraid we should now all have been lying in the dirty water in the ditch at the side of the road. Bus, passengers, car, and all. And this just because some farmer leaves his car in such a foolish place as a curve." This is the ditch. "In the road. Well, I've never run my bus into the ditch yet, and if I can help it, I never shall." "I'm quite certain you never will," Storm said to Marion. "He seems to be an extremely clever driver." "Well, this seems to be where we are to get off," Storm said a few minutes later, as the bus stopped at the bottom of a hill. "Yes, this is Leith Hill," Marion replied. "Can you see the tower at the top of the hill? The hill isn't quite 1,000 feet high, but now that the tower has been built, it may be said with some truth that it is 1,000 feet from the bottom of the hill to the top. It's certainly good to walk about a bit after sitting in the bus for so long," Marion continued as she got out of the bus. "And now I suggest that first of all we walk over to that farm and have a cup of tea to wash away the dust from our throats before we start on our walk. It hasn't rained for 2 weeks, so there must have been at least an inch of dust on the road for the wheels of the bus to send flying in clouds." "Do you say tea at the farm?" Storm asked. "Yes, in many places in the country where tourists come," she answered, "the farmers' wives serve tea with homemade bread and cake, and they do so here too." The farmhouse was a long, low building made of red brick. At one side there was a building for the animals, also of red brick, and at the other side was a nice garden surrounded by a wooden fence, where tea was served. "I wonder where the gate is in this fence," Marion said, as they walked along the side of the garden towards the house. "There must be some way of getting into the garden." This is the gate. Not until they came all the way up to the farmhouse did they find the gate. Just as they were going to open it, the farmer's wife came out with a basket full of corn and started feeding the corn to the fowls running about in front of the house. These are the fowls. When she called, they hurried up to her as fast as their legs and their wings would carry them. One little brown hen especially seemed to be very hungry. It tried to fly up to the basket to get as near to the corn as possible. There were several kinds of fowls, and among them they also saw a turkey. "Look at that funny fellow over there," Marion said. "He looks as if he owned the whole place. So proud, and then he's going to end his life on somebody's Christmas table, no doubt." "This is the turkey. Listen to the strange noise he's making. Isn't he funny? I must always laugh when I see turkeys. They look so much like little old foolish proud men." "Good afternoon," she said to the farmer's wife, who had now finished feeding the fowls. Could you make us a cup of tea?" "Yes, certainly," the woman answered. "If you go into the garden and wait, it will be ready in a few minutes." "Fine, but might I look about a bit while we're waiting?" Storm asked. "You see, I've never visited an English farm before, and I'm interested in seeing whether there is much difference between your farms and the farms of the country they come from." "Certainly. Look about as much as you like, but be careful when you go over to the animals, for we've got a young pig running about loose, and he might brush against your clothes. Pigs, you know, aren't always so clean. He really shouldn't be loose any longer, but ought to be shut up with the other pigs. You can see the 5 fat pigs in there. He runs about so much that he doesn't grow fat like the others. This is the pig. He's such a funny little pig, putting his nose into everything to see what it is, and the children have such a good time playing with him that my husband hasn't had the heart to shut him up with the others yet. But you can see for yourselves that he's much too thin. By now he ought to be almost twice as fat. Well," she continued, picking up 2 empty buckets that were standing outside the kitchen. "This is the bucket. Standing outside the kitchen door. I'd better go to the pump now and get the water for your tea." "Aren't the buckets heavy for you to carry?" Marion asked. "No, that's nothing to speak of. But in my grandmother's time, the work of the farmer's wife was hard. They didn't have a pump at the farm then, but had to walk quite a long distance to a small brook to get water. This is the pump, and this is the brook. Of course, the water in a brook coming down from the hills is always very fine, but it really was too far to go to get water. If you're going up Leith Hill, you will cross the brook on your way up. The path from here to the top of the hill passes the brook at the place where the brook is so narrow that you can cross it in one step. Isn't there a road up the hill from the main road?" Storm asked. "Yes," she answered, "but you had better go by the path through the wood. It's a much nicer way and not so full of dust as the road." After having looked around for a bit, Marion and Storm went into the garden to have their tea. The garden was small and well kept, with 3 or 4 tables for the guests. They chose a table in the corner, under a very large old oak tree. The old oak spread its branches far out on all sides and gave a lovely, cool shade for them to sit in. In the leaves and the branches above their heads they saw birds busily flying in and out, and some of them flew away to return a little later with food for their young. "Look there, on that branch over there," Marion said. "No, not so high up, just above the fence. There is a nest there. I wonder if there are young birds in it." "This is a nest." "No, but there is a bird sitting on eggs, I think," Storm replied. "And that busy little fellow coming now seems to be carrying food to her. Listen to him, singing out to all the world what a clever fellow he is." "Do you think that is what he's doing?" Marion asked. "Well, perhaps you're right. Now I thought he was being the little gentleman, singing to keep her company. But of course you must have a better understanding of the stronger sex than I, and men do like to talk about themselves." Here the farmer's wife interrupted them, bringing a tray with the tea things. She spread a pretty green and brown cloth on the table, put cups, plates, cake, bread and butter, marmalade, and tea on the table, and then left them to themselves again. "She's really a pretty woman, to speak of something else," said Storm, spreading marmalade on a piece of bread. "Don't you think so?" "Yes, if she wasn't quite so fat, one might almost call her beautiful," Marion answered. "But they get too many good things to eat here in the country, I suppose. Let's take a picture of her when she comes for her money. You did bring your camera along, didn't you? Yes, I have got the camera here in my pocket. I'm going to try to get a picture of one of the bees, too, that are flying round these flowers all the time. If I could get very near to a bee, it would make an interesting picture, I think. I would like one of the bird, too, just when he's spreading his wings to fly. But a picture like that would be hard to get, I'm afraid. They move their wings so quickly. And when we have mounted to the top of the hill, I'm going to take a picture of you too, with your pretty head against the blue sky. Don't be foolish, Marion laughed. You had better take a picture of the river Thames, flowing quietly towards London down in the bottom of its valley. This is the valley. That's something worth seeing. I can see rivers that flow through valleys wherever there are hills and rivers in the world, but I don't know how often I may see your sweet face yet. Storm replied, Don't say such things. The farmer's wife might hear you. Look, she's laughing at us, Marion said, trying not to smile. No, she isn't, Storm answered. She's smiling kindly at us. All the world loves a lover, you know. She has seen long ago how I feel about you. Now, do try to be serious, Marion, just for a few minutes while I tell you about this. But I don't want to be serious now, not with people standing about looking at us, at least. Marion cried, jumping up from her chair. I'm going to run all the way to the top of the hill. Catch me if you can. So saying, she ran through the garden gate and started off along the path. Storm had to pay for the tea before he could run after her. So when he left the farm, he could no longer see her. Well, she must be somewhere along this path, he said to himself, and started off. He hadn't walked far, however, before he heard her calling his name, but he couldn't see her anywhere. Where are you? He called. Here, she answered, laughing, and her voice sounded quite near, although he could still see nothing but trees all round. Then he began to look behind trees and up into the branches, hoping to find her there. Call again, he cried, and this time he could hear that her voice came from one of the big old oaks standing by the path. She had found a hole in a hollow tree, big enough for her to get in through. When he found her, he saw that there was almost room enough inside the hollow tree for 6 people, or for 2 armchairs, as Marion suggested. But now comes the difficult part of it, Marion said. How am I going to get out of here again? When I was standing outside, I could reach a branch above the hole. But when I had got in, I found that the bottom of the hole inside the tree was deeper than I thought. I shouldn't like to get a hole in my new frock. Getting out, will you help me, please? She asked. Not until you have listened to what I want to tell you, young lady. Storm laughed. Oh, I don't think you're nice at all, Marion said. In the old days, true gentlemen who were asked to help ladies in danger always mounted their horses at once and rode off to bring help without talking first. That's all very well, but it only takes us away from what we were talking about when you left me so suddenly. What was it I was going to say when you ran off? Oh, yes, now I know. Will you marry me? Is that your price for helping me out? Marion asked, with a smile. I'm afraid it is, he answered very seriously. Oh, well, then I shall have to, I suppose, Marion said, with a laugh. He lifted her out of her hollow tree, and arm in arm they continued up the hill. A little higher up they came to the brook that the farmer's wife had spoken of. Here some of the roots of the trees were above the ground. These are the roots, and in some places the water of the brook had washed the earth away round the roots, so that they lay like brown wet snakes on the ground. Let me help you to jump across, Storm said to Marion. It's a little wider here than I thought, and I am afraid that your feet will slip on the wet stones. She took Storm's hand, and it was a good thing that she did, for just as she was going to jump, her foot slipped, and she would have fallen if he had not supported her. At last they reached the top of the hill, where the tower stood. Doesn't it cost anything to go up there? Storm asked. No, it's quite free, Marion answered. It's funny, you're not the first foreigner I've heard ask that question. Does it seem so strange to you that it should be free of charge?" "Oh, I don't know," he answered. "But you are usually surprised as a tourist to find something that is free of charge. Now, let's go up," he continued, mounting the narrow stairs of the tower. "Look, out there, at the bottom of the valley is the Thames," Marion said. "It looks no bigger than a brook from here, so it must be farther away than I thought," Storm replied. "And what is that white spot over there on the hill?" It's a tent. This is the tent." "I wonder." "No, it's too big for that. I think it's chalk. Between London and the south coast there are many chalk hills. You can see the white chalk hills from the boat when you cross the channel, coming from France to England. But I think there really is a tent down there at the foot of the hill. What fun those fellows must be having! I have often lived in a tent myself at home, with one or two of my friends. It's a fine way to spend your holidays," Storm said. "Is it?" Marion asked. "It seems to me that it must be a rather cold and wet affair. A tent is a poor cover when it rains." "Not if the tent is made of good canvas," Storm replied. "Mine is made of the same kind of canvas as they use for tents in the army, and I'm sure you couldn't wish for a better cover against the rain than my tent. I once slept in it when it was raining hard. Outside the water was pouring down on the roof of the tent, but inside it was quite dry." "Well, I'm glad I don't live in a tent all the same," Marion said. "I hope we shan't have to live in one when we are married. I'm a great lover of nature, but I do prefer to be able to return to a house with a kitchen and a bathroom, and with warm and comfortable rooms, when I have been out all day with the rain pouring down." "You'd never make a good farmer's wife," Storm told her. "No, but am I going to be one?" She smiled. "I never knew you had a farm at home." "I haven't, but I am a great lover of nature, and not just for a day. I should like to walk for miles in a forest with no other company than the animals." "Not even me?" Marion interrupted. "No, you'd rather stay at home and play in the kitchen or lie in the bath all day. You just told me." He laughed. Hand in hand, they ran down the path towards the farm again. At the hollow tree, Storm stopped to ask Marion if she was still willing to become his wife. "If not, I had better put you back into the tree," he said to her. "Are you quite sure?" "Yes, quite certain," she answered. "Even if I was a tired and dirty farmer working all day in the fields to make the soil of our farm better and better, and raising cows and pigs and sheep, and you had to be a farmer's wife and raise hens and sell the eggs in the market every Saturday?" "The way you say it, it sounds quite nice," she answered. "Do you think I could make enough money raising fowls to pay for a bathroom in our farmhouse?" They both laughed at this idea and continued their way. They soon saw the red brick walls of the house again. The woman was standing at the window. A broad, kind smile appeared on her face when she saw Storm and Marion coming hand in hand. "There you see, Marion," Storm said. "All the world loves a lover. Just look at her face. You would think that I had asked her and not you to marry me."